In this video, I'm going to discuss the importance of being a good listener, especially when you're a marketer. When I was in high school, my publications teacher would start off every day by putting a quote up on the chalkboard. And I always loved those quotes. I'm a big quote person. It's something I've always enjoyed. And one day she wrote a quote up there, and I paraphrase because I'm probably not getting it completely right, but it's always stuck with me even years and years later, was most people don't listen, they wait for their turn to talk. Most people don't listen, they wait for their turn to talk. And I've come back to that a lot of times in my life, if it's been professional or personal situations. I try to catch myself being in a conversation, and I am a talker by nature. I love to chit chat, and finding myself that I wasn't really listening to what the other person was saying. I had something I wanted to say, and I was just waiting for a break in the conversation in order to interject it. And a lesson that I've really tried to take to heart, and a skill that I've been constantly working to polish and develop, is my listening skills. And by having strong listening skills, what you're able to do is to work with your customers on a very different level. So let's discuss why listening is so important as a marketer. As a marketer, you have the ability to have many, many different roles. And regardless of what that role is, a lot of it's going to come down to working with people. So why is it so important to listen? Well, let's talk about a couple of things. The first component is that when it comes to having a conversation, a dialogue with people, what research tells us is that the person who talks the most in the conversation tends to believe that conversation went better. So think about different times when you have been carrying on a conversation with somebody and you walked away from that conversation, you're like, oh my goodness, or you walked away thinking that was amazing. Think about how much you spoke and what your perception is versus how much they spoke and what your perception is. We tend to feel better when we talk more. And so by allowing the person that you're working with to speak more, they're going to have a more favorable opinion of how the conversation went. This is a tactic that I use in sales all of the time. As an auctioneer, I get interviewed a lot, okay? I get interviewed all the time because people are interviewing me to see if they're going to hire me. And a strategy that I have used over the years is that as the conversation begins, I interject in there, like, well, let me ask a few questions about your situation, about what's going on. I have a little script that I go through, and I start asking them questions about their situation, who they are, who their business is, what their goals and objectives are, and I let them do the vast majority of the talking. By the time we get to the end of the conversation, I've developed a rapport with them. They've gotten to tell me all about them, their family, their business, whatever the case may be, and they are just absolutely loving the conversation. And so make sure that you put on your listening caps more than you put on your talking caps. One of the things that I started doing when I was first started my own business is that I had a whole sales pitch. I had a whole presentation, a whole sales pitch, and somebody would want to talk to me about my services, and I would just launch into it. And what I realized was that it wasn't working. My close rate was not as good as it should have been. It was not nearly as good as what it could be. I'm still working to develop that. I think we all should be. But when I realized it was because, frankly, I was just talking too much, and I started developing more conversation and listening skills, that's when things really started to shift, and that things actually started to really take off in my business. The next thing is, by listening, you're demonstrating that you care. Another favorite quote of mine is that people I always flubber it a little bit. People don't care until they know how much you care. And again, I flubbed that one just a little bit there. But when you demonstrate caring towards a person, that is when that they're going to feel a connection with you. We've all probably heard the sayings before. It's not who you know, or it's not what you know, but who you know. And I always like to put a little tagline on the end of that. So it's not what you know, but who you know, and how much they like you. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have a good relationship with someone, it doesn't matter if they know you or not. So you need to have that good rapport there. In addition to that, use silence as one of your secret weapons. One thing that I've learned in marketing, especially in sales throughout the years, is that when you ask people questions, especially when it comes to more personal questions, which in my job I often have to do because we're getting into more intimate situations of why people are wanting to sell their assets, and I've learned that when I ask the question and then stop talking and then they start to answer me, my natural tendency used to that they would say, well, why are you looking to downsize? And they would say, oh, well, and they'd give me an answer. And then as soon as they were done with the answer, I'd start talking again. One of my mentors told me, stop talking, be quiet and see what they say next, because we are very uncomfortable with silence. We have been taught to continuously carry the conversation forward. And so by not saying anything and just kind of leaning in just a little bit, kind of giving a little encouraging nod, people will begin to talk again. And what you'll find is that many of times when they start that conversation again, that is where you're going to uncover more information about their motives, their desires, and their pain points. So that is the reason why listening is so important. And by asking questions, be an active listener, and taking down the information that they have to say, you will be more successful in your career as a marketer.